Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And we're back on Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnet, Bain, and our guest today, Tim Kring, who is the creator of amazing, amazing shows, Touched, Heroes, and others. Before we went to break, Barnet, you were talking about an online show called Daybreak, and there's one specific video which just grabbed you, having to do with frequency.
And modeled the impact of a frequency with the expression of that certain sand took in terms of form and mandalas and things. And so what I wanted to tie it back to is in very practical terms, Tim, you are a guy who expresses a certain kind of emotional energies. You have a very particular set of gifts and talents and interests in the world. Many of those values, all of those values, are expressed in your work. And if we were going to use as a metaphor this sandbox, it is not unreasonable to say that your work is an expression of certain kind of energetic inputs.
So, yeah. Okay.
Now where I'm going with this is just as there is so much potential for understanding in touch, for instance, that when people begin to reflect for a second that we are maybe all one, and that the deed that we do here threads back in some wonderful, mysterious way to somebody else. When we talk about the energies that we are, the emotional states that we inhabit and that we express, it can also maybe be understood that there is impact on others and in the world, likewise, just from the emotional states that we inhabit. And
yeah, I know, I absolutely believe that, and I think at the center of what I'm trying to do is use, if you could call it, I imagine that narrative itself has some form of frequency that it exists on, and that narrative, when you look at the kind of narrative that I've been interested in, and I seem to be gravitating towards more and more, is an archetypal narrative, stories of good and evil, and fathers and sons, and the hero's journey, all of those things, these tap into very deep sort of frequencies, I think, in all of us that are very primordial, familiar frequencies that they came from, when we used to sit around the campfire and hear stories, and these stories would tell us how we were going to be, or show us the way to become better people, be a better soldier, or a better father, or a better son, or a better daughter. And the difference between right and wrong. And those things have been so replaced in modern society and by consumer culture or celebrity culture, and I think people are lost and starved for any kind of story that points them in the right direction and that resonates with the kind of frequency that they find comforting and familiar. So,
and these frequencies, I mean, in my mind, or my heart, because that's what I was about to get to, are felt. I mean, I love what you were saying about the fragility of this muse that you tap into, and that it's a felt communication. It's access vis-a-vis your feelings, and it's not something you can explain in intellectual terms. It doesn't get processed that way. It operates in a kind of mystery, but yet it's quite familiar. So in other words, the stories may come out of a space that doesn't chunk down in modern terms to something you can brand and, but it has a thread that but you couldn't possibly tell people how you know it.
Right. It exists more as poetry than prose.
Yes.
Right?
Beautiful.
And it's like trying to describe to somebody that song that you heard on the radio this morning that made you well up with emotion. It's we're really incapable of taking that experience and raising it up above the above the neck so that it's all head, and it's very, very difficult to describe. And so when you work in an industry that is so driven by, bottom line, which is so driven by analytics and so driven by the head, it's very hard to work within that system when you are driven by something very different.
Well, these stories, these narratives, they come out of frequency and energy, much like the mandalas come out of the sand in the sandbox. And not only do the stories emerge in that way, but the structures to disseminate and to share the stories, they themselves are forms that emerge out of a function. The form follows the function. So you created this multi-platform vehicle called Conspiracy for Good. It's this absolutely innovative container for both communicating a narrative in a kind of non-linear, non-traditional way, and at the same time, it is it has this it has this current of activism that is involved. And again, it is so much the form follows the function. Here is I'm threading it back to what it is, what are the value sets that motivate you, and what are the gifts and talents that arrange themselves in the sandbox of your energy field, and find expression in the world in a particular way that is both entrancing and entraining and creates community and service. So I want you to just take us through how that happened.
Well, Conspiracy for Good was a really interesting project, and the next iteration of it is in the works now, to be, I think, sort of much more interesting and bigger than the first. But the first really came out of when Heroes became a big hit, and we had this massive online audience that gravitated around it. I started to see that this audience was connected to the underlying message in the show, one of hope and interconnectivity and global consciousness. And I started to think, well, if the show is all about saving the world, and we talked about that all the time, what if we tried to roll that out into the real world? And now with the ability to have story live pervasively around you, in other words, we are almost never offline. We are connected to a connected device all of the time. And that device that's in your hand, usually a mobile phone or a tablet, can be, not only a content consumption device, but a content creation device. It allows you to take videos or text or send an email or whatever it is that pushes content around and forward. And in the social world, in the world of Twitter, you can live inside of a narrative 24 hours a day. So we took this idea of like, well, wouldn't it be interesting to create, mythology? In this case, it was a secret society that has existed for 2,000 years that you didn't realize had actually existed. And this secret society has quietly been responsible for all of the major philosophical, philanthropic, technological advancements of mankind in the last 2,000 years. You just had no idea that it was actually there. But now, with transparency being what it is and interconnectivity being what it is, you now have the ability to see it and to connect to it and to be tapped on the shoulder and to be a part of this secret society. And the clues to this secret society's missions are all around you now that you know how to find them. So we took the big giant phone company Nokia sponsored this particular project, and using we had narrative that was online, narrative that was on mobile, and then eventually, and this is where it got interesting, we had 4 weeks of narrative that took place on the streets of London. We had up to 40 actors. You found your way through the narrative by using applications on your phone that were able to unlock, like a hidden scavenger hunt, videos and clues and missions, concerts that were held at night. And as a result of this narrative, and defeating these bad guys that we ended up defeating, we made way for 4 libraries to be built in eastern Zambia, 10,000 books donated by the participants, and 50 scholarships given away to schoolgirls. So the idea that this real-world result came out of a fictitious narrative was something that I don't think had ever been done before.
It's funny you say a fictitious narrative, because while I understand you know how that you created it and so forth, something we see on this show, the story you're telling is the reality that you're promoting, and I love how this generated vision and engagement, and again, this idea, which both Barnet and I have alluded to, the stepping into the mystery and allowing, and this thread concept that we're pulling together on these threads that, in essence, we desperately want. They're threads to a archetype, to myth, that we don't tangibly hold, because again, our current world doesn't reflect that back.
Right.
We don't have the circle of men, we don't have the campfires and the dances and this and that, but we know it's there. And so I think, though, the fictitious part, of course, we know that the fiction and the truth are always a little bit close together. That it's brilliant. It's a great way to illustrate some truths.
The whole idea of that, exactly what you're saying, was and the next iteration of this will go much bigger. The first one was, while it was big and crazy, because we had over 130 people working on this project in 5 countries for 18 months, so it was certainly a very big project. But it ended up with a very small footprint in that what we did in the real world was fairly small, limited. But the next iteration of it will be much bigger. And the whole idea, we had a saying while we were doing it, because we pretended like a lot of stuff was real. That there were these real bad guys out there, a real evil corporation that we had to bring down, and all that. The truth is, our saying that we had was, it's not real, but we can make it real. In other words, there was no conspiracy for good until we created it, and then there was this, and then there is this movement that comes out of it, and it's a very big and bold goal to place in front of us. But I would love for the next version of this to be ubiquitous. In other words, the story can take place no matter where you are in the world, and by tying big ubiquitous brands to it that we all know about when we swipe our card or walk into a coffee shop that seems to be everywhere, then you could actually have a narrative that lives all around you, so that the brands that you interact with and the places you frequent and the music that you download would all share an economy that would live underneath the umbrella of a conspiracy for good.
That is so fantastic. What I love most about it, I love how you're doing it, and I love the synergies that you're bringing together. But what I love most about it is that you are, and it is the role of our artists to do this. For the most part, they do it unawares. That's not the case here. You are excavating our subconscious and our collective unconscious, and bringing to light things that are roiling around just below, big themes, big ideas, big belief systems that are roiling around just below the surface of things, bringing them up and bending them towards a certain kind of healthy, integrated, proactive, a beautiful activism and a sense of community and purpose and connection. So the mission statement that I'm sort of operating under is a very loose one, but it's really it's just how to use narrative. It's the only sort of skill set that I have. I couldn't pound a nail, or I'm not sure I could fall back on anything else. But to use it to try to create and promote positive change in the world. It's a loose, and a fairly non-specific mission statement, but that's what sort of drives me.
You do a lot of falling forward rather than falling back. That's my impression of you, Tim. A lot of stepping into the mystery, a lot of going, all right, let's see if this will fly.
Well, I think part of it is that after a long career that I've had, I've seen how fragile that career can be in Hollywood. Yeah. I'm always trying to look for where the new avenues are, and as you go forward in life, you realize that life is very much a quest to stay relevant, and so that's
adding value to the lives of yourself and others is as surefire a way to stay relevant as probably any other. But there are a lot of folks who espouse those values, not so many that live into them. So we are really, really grateful to have had you as our guest on the program today, and we hope that you'll come back, and maybe next time you'll drive down here and join us in studio.
I'd love to. And I don't. The truth is, I don't get asked a lot of these questions in my life down here in Hollywood. So,
well, we're here to serve that purpose, Tim.
We aim to please. Yes, that's why we're out of town.
Yeah. Hey, no, listen, I'm thrilled you spent the time with us, and again, we really do invite you to come back, and we want folks to please go and check out Daybreak. That is on the World Wide Web.
Yeah, you can find it just by Google searching it, or on Machinima it's on, and you'll find it just by Googling it.
Perfect. So Google Daybreak, and of course, keep watching Touched. And if you haven't seen the back episodes of Heroes, check those out, and anything else Tim is doing. Thanks so much, Tim, for spending time with us.
Thanks, guys.
And for those of you listening, stay tuned, because we'll be right back here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.